hoping you would give me a slightly more interesting bio, make up some fake facts, but that's okay. And I just want to say I'm getting over having had bronchitis for like 3 months, so bear with me, please. In the mirror. The man was no one special to her, but he was responsive, and in a certain light his face could seem charming. He sat at the bar and appeared to be intensely contemplating the bottles on the back wall. She often saw people engaged in this pretense, looking intently at phones in an attempt to camouflage their loneliness. People were afraid to be seen idly taking up space. They needed to demonstrate that they were important to someone in order to justify existing. She disliked those sorts of people. So when she saw the man, he stood out like a pillar of stone, asserting, "Yes, I am here, and I do not care if I have no purpose." When she approached him, she feigned recognition, a game that had worked in her favor before. "Oh, I'm sorry, it's just, I was supposed to meet someone here and I got lost." The man replied that he'd been at the bar for some time and hadn't seen her friend. Here she had to gauge him before proceeding. No ring, nice but boring clothes, sneakers made so that they would not look like sneakers. The arm of his wire-rimmed rectangular glasses had worn a slight groove into his temple. She decided that feigning disappointment would be a softer display, and sighed heavily as she pulled out her phone. "Not again. I can't believe this keeps happening to me. You wouldn't think it's that hard to show up for a first date." The man shrugged, but asked her to sit down. Through the distortion of the half-filled glass bottles, she watched their two faces float in the bar's mirror. As the bartender poured out measures of bourbon for them, she anticipated the touch of the man, like a honey-colored liquid poured down into her. The man did not matter, only that he was present and a stranger willing to pity her. "I'm sorry to take your time. Were you waiting for someone?" "No, I just haven't been sleeping well lately." The man spoke, and she pictured her heart like a drain into which he might dump his solicitudes, he and the other men she'd used to satiate that hunger. She wondered if experience settled down into a person like sediment, or if it sluiced through you, as though you were a sieve, unable to hold on no matter what you gathered. The man mentioned a separation, a child that had been taken away. She said she was so sorry, but those words had no substance for her. How could they, when inside her the void was pulling her toward him to engage in her inevitable act of obliteration, and all she cared about was getting there as soon as possible? She entered his house fully expecting to never see its interior again. Things were in a state of disarray that suggested most of his story was true. Boxes half-filled and abandoned, one from which the ghostly sleeve of a child's sweater hung empty and menacing. This was what the end of a world looked like, she thought. A dull house nearly gutted, empty rooms scattered with torn papers, beige wall-to-wall carpet, with 3 drops of what could have been chocolate sauce or blood in the middle of the room. The house was terrifying, and exactly the reason she never learned a lover's last name. The essences of those other residents were palpably absent. If she reached out her hand, she was sure a field of warm air would betray where once they'd stood. She hurried the man into the bedroom. The sheets had slid off the bed like the shed skin of a reptile. A dresser stood gap-toothed due to the removal of a drawer. On the far side of the room, a large mirror on the wall trapped in different ghosts of the space between its silver borders. She pushed the man back on the bare mattress of his bed, which was luxuriously puffed and looked expensive. She kissed him, his warm mouth awakening the practiced motions of her ritual. They liked it when she unbuttoned their shirts or else pulled them off. She would let them kiss her and put their hands under her clothes for a while. Then she'd step back and maintain eye contact while opening her blouse and rolling her hips out of her skirt. As she did this, she caught her reflection. Only what she saw couldn't have been her. The woman in the mirror looked back at her with fortitude. Her eyes burned dark sparkles of command, her body as beautiful and invulnerable as a marble statue. As they fell into the rhythm of the act, she sighed in relief, but she never took her eyes off her reflection. Afterward, he took a shower. She sat on the edge of the bed, her clothes scattered to the tangle of sheets on the floor, mesmerized by her image in the mirror. Never had she seen herself in such majesty, such utter perfection. Even the sweat-smeared rills of mascara under her eyes took the shape of the Egyptian flourishes once meant to give the pharaohs powers of vision. "Where did this come from?" she asked him. "It was hers," he said, heaving a sigh as he sat down next to her. "A family heirloom. It's a real antique. I'll buy it." "I can't sell that. It's not mine." Some movers are coming for it next week. I can pay. Whatever the price is, I'll pay it. He shook his head. I should get some sleep, I guess, he said. She wanted to spit on him. They don't get to use lame lines like that on her. It was her part to say she couldn't stay, to walk out on them. He flopped down on the bed, face down, so he wouldn't have to answer any more questions. She gathered her clothes, stepped out of the room to dress herself, and let the door slam on her way out. At home, she decontaminated herself of him, balling up her blouse in disgust when she could still detect the stale, frustrated scent of his house on it. Her bathroom mirror reflected a girl past her saleable date. She squinted at her double's wrinkles, stretch marks, pores. This being was not her. No, this shape standing in the bathroom could not truly represent her. It was a lie, an imposter. Throughout that week, she'd catch glimpses of another body where hers should have been. The hand beginning to grow veiny and spotted in the window of the bus was not hers. Alien legs stomped heavily alongside her in the plate glass department store window. The eyes that looked out, dim and wet, whites blooming with red from the mirrored back wall of the bar were an impossibility. That night had opened her eyes to her true self, and here a rapacious world stole that vision from her and threw up these monstrosities in its place. She returned to the same bar for 3 nights in a row seeking the man. He had to give her the mirror. Twice already she'd not recognized her own reflection. Her mirror double grew more grotesque as the days passed, accosting her with tangled hair, dark under-eye circles, haggard parentheses around a garishly red slash of a mouth. His mirror had taken her best self and imprisoned it. She waited for the man and tried to avoid reflective surfaces. When she found him seated at the bar again, he pretended not to recognize her. Sliding into the seat next to his, she tried to recall what fake name she'd given him. You remember me, right? We met last week, I think. We had a pretty good time that night. She stroked his arm. Did we? If we go back to your place again, maybe I can jog your memory. 3 more drinks, and her hand on his thigh broke down what remained of his resistance. They returned to the dark side of his domestic wreckage. As they moved toward the bedroom, him laughing inappropriately and pawing at her like a teenager, her heart beat in time with the mantra circling her mind. Let it still be here. Let it still be here. Her relief upon seeing their weaving reflections from the doorway washed over her like a sudden rain. She exhaled deeply, feeling the fear flow out on her breath as her divine double did the same. He had been leaning on her for support, and she let him drop. He cursed and then resumed giggling. The mirror, I need it, she said. She stood face to face with her ideal self, her breath forming a halo of condensation over their perfect cherry lips. Oh, that wouldn't fit in the truck. He rolled over and propped his head up with his cradled hands. Whatever you want for it. Her hand moved over the cold metal curves of the frame with greater tenderness than she'd ever used on any of the men she'd employed to satisfy her addiction. She could not take her eyes from her image. She spoke as if negotiating with her reflection. I said it's not mine. Her lawyer would kick my ass. This is coming with me. It has to. He laughed again, that idiot noise. She wished she could paralyze him with a glance, like a mythic monster. And as she thought this, her image in the mirror seemed to crackle with unseen power, becoming more darkly radiant. Her double stood fingertip to fingertip with her. Their lips nearly touched as she pressed herself closer. Come on, baby, come over here, he said from the floor. There was no way she could take the mirror by force. It was taller than she and impossible to move by herself. Still, she had to have her reflection back. Her hand tightened into a fist. She pulled back. The impact moved like an electric shock up her elbow, blood immediately seeping into the spiderweb cracks spreading across the mirror. But even broken, the mirror reflected multitudes of her beauty in its shards. A wail rode the air that she came to recognize as her own. The man was up now and shouting something. Her double was still pinned in the cracked glass. Bloodied fingertips clawed at the mirror, shards falling like snow from her dripping fists. A force tried to pull her away. It was the man. She threw her weight against the silver frame. Her free hand clutched at the broken glass. His drunkenness gave her a moment's advantage, which she used to push his feet out from under him. She knew what she had to do. She plucked out 2 small triangular shards that glittered on her fingertips. The pain as she pushed each into her eyes grew, from a sharp itch into a searing needle. But now any light that entered would strike these pieces. Her eyes would project her perfect image wherever she might look.